Welcome back to Sustainability Forward. I'm your host, Wrishi. With me, as always, is my co-host, Carmine. How are you, Carmine?
Good, Richie. Welcome to be back.
That's right. Carmine, usually on our podcast, we talk about sustainability in terms of energy systems. We talk about infrastructure, capital, what's the long-term impact of all of this. But one of the constraints that we usually do not talk about is organizational capacity. We may have touched upon this topic in the past, but we don't discuss it at length. Of course, we've talked about the fact that energy demand is rising quite a bit, and systems are getting more and more complex with the focus on energy transition, focus on safety, reliability. And yet, it feels like most organizations are being asked to deliver all of this with the same teams, more or less the same kind of structure, and the same ways of working. Having sort of read some of the things in and around this topic, I thought today we'll ask one simple question, and that is, how do you scale output? How do you improve decision quality and reliability without simply adding more people, right? That's the central thing that we want to explore in this episode. And to do that and help us understand the nuances of this, we have a special guest. Would you please introduce him, Carmine?
Yes. So we are talking today about the topic intersection of technology and people. And we had the pleasure to have Subodh Kumar. And Subodh is the founder and CEO of Brisk AI and alumnus of Harvard Business School. He brings over 18 years of global experience across the energy and technology sectors, with roles spanning operations, strategy, and product leadership at organizations such as Shell, BP, McKinsey & Company, and Dell Technologies. His work focuses on helping enterprises translate data and AI into measurable business impact. Subodh is the author of Agentic AI for Leaders, where he explores how leaders can build AI fluency, redesign work, and scale agentic AI from experimentation to enterprise adoption. This perspective bridges deep industry context with modern AI capabilities, helping leaders think and act transformationally as they transition towards AI native operating model. Subodh has also written a book recently. The title is Agentic AI for Leaders, about which we will hear more in this episode. So Subodh, welcome to Sustainability Forward.
Thank you. Thanks, Carmine and Rishi, for inviting me to this podcast. Looking forward to a discussion on this topic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for full disclosure, I must say that Subodh and I go long back when we started our careers in an energy company. And so today's discussion is kind of also a reflection of what has happened since the time we started working in the energy industry. Obviously, a lot has changed. And in the context of AI and things that have evolved in the energy industry, today's discussion is going to be, I think, a very fruitful one. So, Subodh, the first thing that I was thinking about is, as I mentioned in the introduction, the industry seems to have become more complex because of the things that have happened within the industry as well as market forces. Is the complexity and the cognitive load that the industry faces today, is it more substantial or bigger than the workforce size that companies have? Can you help us unpack that a little bit?
Absolutely, Rishi. So the way I'm seeing the industry, and as I work with the leaders in these industries, both on upstream and downstream, one of the things is becoming clearer is it's not only the headcount issue that the industry is facing. Like you rightly said, it's all about the complexity and the cognitive load that the existing people, whether they are in engineering, operating roles, that they have to deal with. So look around globally, right? Our asset bases are aging, and they have been retrofitted with additional layers of digital sensors, systems, and the regulations have gone more stricter, so there are more compliance requirements. And then you add to it another layer of energy transition, right? So there are these new type of assets and technologies getting added in the whole value chain. So that's what I see as increasing that cognitive load, and the need to preserve the context. That's what I see. And indeed, like one of the operations leaders that I was talking to, he made a very interesting point. He said, in 90% of the cases, when something goes down in the plant, uh, they said we are very sure that this issue has come in the past, but they just don't know when it happened and how it was fixed, right? So in this industry, I mean, there are some unique aspects, right? Work happens in shifts, and the problems are episodic, so they may not be regular. So it's all about how do you build that context, preserve that context, and surface it at the right time, so that people don't have to deal with finding the information, but rather quickly make judgment and act on it.
Yeah. I remember, Subodh, when we were starting off in one of the earlier kind of foundational courses about process engineering, someone said that you'll not only encounter these problems again in your career, you'll also encounter the same solutions again. It's just that you may not remember that this solution was done by somebody. So I think that is that's probably, you know, it was probably the same thing that was reflected many years ago that we are talking about probably now at a much bigger bigger scale. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. And I mean, one additional force that I am seeing, right, that leaders, especially in Northern America, like US, Canada, and I would love to hear your context from Europe, is the expertise retiring faster than the new talent joining the industry, right? So even if it's not that there are less people in the industry, it's about losing that institutional knowledge. So I think that's becoming a bigger issue.
And this is where technology could help. So there is a lot of talk here and there about what AI can bring. But before entering more into details, probably is helpful to baseline with you AI tools from agentic AI or let's say other AI types, how they differ in terms of automation or a copilot, how they can be a tool or a teammate. Can you help us to understand a little bit how they can play out and help us here?
Absolutely, Carmen. Like that's a great point, and I think the time at which we are talking about is really transformational. Like if you look into some of the recent news, like the SaaS companies stocks have been under a huge downfall. With one news coming from Anthropic that they launched their co-work platform. So, like you rightly said, so there are tools that are coming up, but the bigger thing is the way in which agentic AI has evolved is that it's no longer about adopting another tool. It's really thinking of it as your teammate, right? So, a teammate that can actually own parts of the work, that can augment the existing human talent, so that you can do a lot more with the same workforce, right? So in the past, our industry in the past 15, 20 years, we adopted lots of machine learning based solutions, be it on the operations, on the maintenance side of things. But any of those solutions would eventually give you some recommendations, and then the humans will make further judgments, act on those. And in many cases, any solution that you develop is customized to a certain plan, customized to a certain scenario. But now with generative AI, uh, that scaling has been achieved, that the same trained model can be taken and applied to many different problems and many different contexts with a reasonable level of certainty. So that's what is making this generative AI powered solutions as your teammates than just another tool.
And Subodh, is this a volume play? Is an efficiency play? Is it a quality play? Or all the above? How we should think about it?
I would think all of the above, but most importantly, it's about the expertise, really bringing more expertise that organizations, that as humans, we have for our rescue, for our available, to help us in our daily jobs, right? Because efficiency play, I would say, is more about automation. So even in the traditional automation, when we have a reasonable understanding of the steps that it needs to be taken, that level of automation has been in existence for maybe over a couple of decades now. I think it's about that intelligence layer, which to me is really exciting.
So is it about incorrect to think of what is coming into the industry as the next level of automation? That's probably the wrong benchmark, right? It's not like we are going from one level of automation to a much higher level of automation with these new tools. We are actually talking about intelligence that's going to recommend us what to do and not necessarily just automate something that we already know what the steps are.
See, the way I see actually thinking of it as an automation kind of sets the wrong bar to a large extent. Because when you think of automation, you like we tend to think of a near perfection, right? So, hey, we automated it. So given any these inputs, this is the output. But in an agentic AI context, I think the more we think of it as a team member, like a new team member, it may not be giving the right answers on day one, but we need to remember that AI-based systems can learn much faster than a lot of the humans, and they only tend to become better and better over time, right? So that's where I tend to think that it's not about automation; it's more about intelligence that works alongside the humans.
Makes sense. One of the things that I was thinking of in this context is, I mean, some of the use cases come to mind very quickly, and there maybe are multiple other use cases that we do not typically think about in the context of AI in energy. Can you help us understand some of the categories of these use cases and maybe also give us some examples which can help us understand this better?
Sure. So, see, there are two kind of use cases that I am seeing. One is kind of these low-hanging fruits, which are already in practice. Other are more aspirational. So, if I think of the low-hanging fruits, those are the use cases which helps you to reduce cognitive load and preserve context. So, think of a use case that we were working with one of the clients into maintenance planning. So having an AI-powered maintenance planning agent that drafts the work orders based on your inspection data by going into your standard operating procedures, equipment manuals, so that the human planners don't have to spend time in the paperwork, but rather they spend more time in simply prioritizing the tasks and not becoming a bottleneck for your technicians on site, right? So those are the kind of use cases. And another example being in shift handovers, AI playing a role as a connective tissue so that the team members are not spending time on rediscovering the same problems. So these are the more kind of practical use cases that I'm already seeing companies experimenting with. And then there are more aspirational use cases. The kind of use cases I've like one comes to my mind is related to subsurface, let's say reservoir planning, thinking of deciding where to drill the next wells. So in the current context, engineers spend months of time in running these simulations and then deciding where to drill that next well. So those are the use cases where, again, there are experimentations happening on how we use these large language models or large visual models to help facilitate that. But those are fairly complex problems given the underlying physics involved. So those are the ones I would say will materialize probably with more kind of capabilities on the modeling side.
Yeah, and so I've had some familiarity with these issues, and I think there are two aspects. One is that from subsurface information linked to the reservoir. So number one, you get a huge volume of data, and that has always been true. So a huge volume of data needs to be processed and it gets collected, right? And subsurface locations talk to each other. So if you know something about one part of subsurface, it'll tell you possibly something else about another part of the same structure, right? So with time, AI will improve, but it can probably bring improvements in this understanding, in the processing of this large quantity of data. I also think there is a second aspect, which is that drilling one well incorrectly, particularly in an offshore context, can lead to significant loss of money, right? And I think that's why coming up with these pinpointed locations has always been a big issue for all exploration production companies. And I think that's where, with time, better use of AI can probably help us pinpoint accurately where the next well needs to be drilled.
Indeed.
Yeah. Any other sort of left field crazy cases that you have seen as examples of potential use cases?
I think use cases are plenty if I had to think of it. Like you rightly said, Rishi, it's all about that tolerance for error and what's at stake, right? So there are use cases which are either economically uh, too uh, too risky to pursue, or it could be related to safety. So that's where I think use cases, you pick any function, any role, and that's where in the book that I have written, right? So I have come with a framework for leaders and for team members to literally go through systematically and identify what are the use cases that they can have. I think the real next step is about really prioritizing and deciding what are you comfortable with having AI to do versus what you continue to own. So I think that that's a real decision to be made.
And so, but let's go a little bit deeper here, also connecting what you said before about thinking AI as a teammate. Because this will underlines also a level of trust when thinking AI, the technology as a colleague, a level of safety. So how we can still make this happening? Keeping in mind the human interaction on how we can control it.
I think that's a really good point, Parvine. I think the answers we will kind of find over time in the grand scheme of things, but I would say the key here is to start with use cases, as we call it, like human in the loop kind of use cases, so that AI based solutions, you need to assume that they are gonna make some mistakes. They will not always be accurate, right? So the key here is how do you design the work or the use cases so that it's not right away hitting the endpoint, right? Let's say if it's a customer facing solution, like if I pick another example from another industry, like Air Canada, they had launched an AI powered chatbot, and this chatbot ended up in one of the customer interactions ended up promising a refund to the customer in a very famous case that went even to the courts here, which was against the policy, right? But
I wonder,
the company had to live with that because they could not really pass on the accountability to the AI that, hey, it's only AI who said that.
I wonder what would have happened if the agent would have upgraded the person to first class, but it's an interesting issue. I think the point about trusting an AI teammate, I think that probably is one thing that's probably has a long way to go from now.
It is not just
Indeed.
about address, maybe it's also about fear. It's about, okay, probably some part of the work is taken by somebody else, kind of automated. So there are all this kind of the dynamic that we need to learn to live with, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fear of even job loss to some extent. And today, interestingly, one of my ex-colleagues, he just sent me a text right after reading the book, and he made some really interesting observations. He's like, okay, AI as a team member, but how do I think about social interactions then? Right? So he's like, okay, maybe I will do some work, AI will do some work, we will collaborate. But I go to office for work because I also want to interact with people, right?
Yeah.
So I would say there are some issues that are going to come up as we adopt the technology more and more. So at least it's good to kind of think through these potential issues, and then slowly the solutions will start shaping.
Yeah. Maybe 10 years later, I'll be doing a podcast with an AI teammate.
Probably even sooner.
Yeah. Now, what I wanted to ask you, Subodh, having read some parts of your book, which is appropriately titled Agentic AI for Leaders, is how should or what should leaders be doing differently today? Whether it comes to redesigning the work, building AI fluency within their organizations, or even encouraging safe experimentation, right? Where should they start? Is there sort of a good sequence of things to do today that will set them up for success for the future?
I would say, Rishi, like from the experience that I have had after interacting with multiple companies, I see one of the key starting points has to be building AI fluency for the functional teams. Because a lot of the companies that I interact with, people are still thinking of agentic AI in the form of automation, right? So, and sometimes they are even linking a technology tool, the failure of the technology tool, let's say, without naming, say, one of the copilots in a workplace gave them wrong answer, and people would very soon extrapolate it that, hey, agentic AI is still not, hasn't still reached that level, right? So that's where I think that fluency is the foundational stone for people to understand what agentic AI, generative AI are capable of, what they are not. Because end of the day, functional teams have to play a much bigger role in this transition. So it's less of a technology problem, more of an operating model redesign that leaders need to think about, right? So that's where I think the starting point is building AI fluency. And as teams start to leverage AI, as they start to experiment, leaders have to start thinking about this operating model redesign. What I mean by that is, what are the new roles and responsibilities? What are we comfortable with uh, AI owning versus humans owning, right? What are the right guardrails that we put in place? What are the right control mechanisms we put in place, right? So let's say if there are autonomous cars on the roads, are you able to switch them off when you need to, right? So, and if anything goes wrong, who takes accountability? So designing that whole operating model is crucial next step once you build that AI fluency and start experimenting.
Yeah.
So let's stay there on the book, on this new book you just wrote. So Agentic AI for Leaders. Why did you choose to write this book, and what do you think are some of the key messages and blind spots that we should be aware?
Yeah, so my core motivation for this, Carmen, has been based on the consistent pattern that I saw while interacting with leaders from across industries. And that's been that there is a huge curiosity uh, and excitement about the technology that leaders have, uh, but they don't know where to start, right? So, and that's what we are seeing, right? The advancements in AI technologies have been humongous, but the real world applications are still very few. So that was my core motivation. How do we create the right set of information, like that source of how does it become that right source of information, so that the functional teams leaders can understand what this AI technology is all about. And secondly, how do they go about systematically discovering use cases in their own teams, because that's where they're struggling. That what all can they really do with AI, and where should they start? So that's been the core motivation. Sorry, I forgot, Carmine, what was the other part of the question? I know it was probably
And
three
if you,
parts.
no, that's very helpful. It's but the question was, there is any blind spot that you doing your research that you saw and you recommend to leader to look at? Things that, for example, we are underestimating, overlooking.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest blind spots I see is a lot of the leaders are still treating AI as another technology deployment, and hence they are leaving it largely to their IT teams or to the technology vendors to come and pitch it to them. Right. And that's where you see, right? MIT came with some statistics like 95% of the pilots, early pilots have failed, right? And one of the key reasons is when you are going after those shiny demos by technology vendors, right? You are not necessarily picking the right use cases for your functions, right? So I think that's one of the key kind of blind spots, that it's not just another technology to be adopted. It's a real world operating model change. So leaders need to proactively think through what parts of their work could be reshaped and assigned to some of the AI agents while still keeping the overall control on the decision making.
But I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of crystal ball gazing and tell us, when do you think the energy industry in particular will see a breakthrough in terms of adoption of AI? Are we talking about 10 years or is it coming in 18 months? Is there sort of a, having done all this research for your book and having worked with these organizations, do you have a sense of when that time is?
I would say somewhere in between, Rishi, when we can see meaningful adoption of agentic AI. My guess would be like maybe 4 to 5 years time frame, because I already see things in motion. So some of the low hanging fruits, like we talked about, those context preserving use cases, right, or reducing the cognitive load. So I see some of the tools for those use cases are already being used, and I think that's the right kind of starting point. So probably 4 to 5 years, and which is okay for this sector, right? Because unlike many other sectors like SaaS or digital companies, I think the stakes are high here. So it's better to kind of take more judicious decisions.
Yeah. No, it is. And it's not an industry that's known for a rapid pace. So 5 to 6 years probably will be a good achievement. So we're getting sort of to the end of this episode. And when I started thinking about this episode, I actually wasn't thinking of this as a conversation on AI. The keywords that were in my mind were around capacity, trust, how organizations actually get work done in this new context. Those are the things that I had in mind. And on the podcast, Carmine, you'll obviously remember, is that we've talked about building systems and scaling them over time. I think with some of the things that Subodh has described, it seems like with AI and with the help of AI, as well as with AI in the at the center, there are probably some systems that need to be developed, not just thinking about AI as a tool, as Subodh was saying earlier. I think that phase is coming for this industry as well. For our listeners, I just want to highlight again that Subodh has written this amazing book called Agentic AI for Leaders. It's available on Amazon. We'll also leave a link to this book in the podcast description. So those of who you're interested in this topic, please feel free to buy a copy of the book. Subodh, thanks for joining us and sharing your perspective on on this subject. Again, a great conversation, and of course, a great book as well.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate you guys inviting. Thank you so much.
All right. And to our listeners around the world, thanks for tuning in to Sustainability Forward. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on any of the platforms that you listen to podcasts on. We'll, of course, continue to keep interesting episodes coming to you. Carmine, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you, Wrishi, and I hope I will not be substituted soon by an agentic podcaster soon. So
I will invite you to a podcast 10 years down the line for sure. All right. Take care.
Thank you.